Hello everybody, how are you? I know that it's tough. I wish I could be there too. This has not been an easy injury to say the least. But the good thing is I'll be back with you guys next week. So I am scheduled to be in there on the 13th. And your essays due the 14th. My bad, that was a typo. So that means that the day after I get back, your essay will be due, so you can hit me up with any of those last minute questions, concerns, or any of that. What I want to do today is I want to go over the prompt with you. I'll break it down, and I'll go into some things that you can talk about. Alright, so this is a long essay question. I gave you guys the rubric. Make sure you are breaking down using that rubric in order to help you understand how to do this. This is basically the same as DBQ, except we're not using documents to support our thesis. The information is just coming straight from you. And that's actually a good thing, because you don't have to worry about using and applying the documents correctly, right? Basically, the important thing is the information. You're just using the information to support you. So as long as you have a decent handle on the information, this is actually an easier essay to write. So I just go over with you very quickly. Contextualization: what is the historical context relevant to the prompt? Okay, so what leads up to it? Now this is to what extent was the Revolution of 1800 aptly named? Why do we want to call this the Revolution of 1800? All right, a revolution is a fundamental change. So what is the big fundamental change here? The fundamental change in the Revolution of 1800 is going to be the shift in power from, I'll make some notes here for you, shift in power from Federalist rule to Democratic Republican rule. All right, this is the first peaceful transition of power in U.S. history. All right, so what do we want to talk about? Basically you want to set the scene. Why is this important? I think something obvious to throw in there would be the Alien Sedition Acts. Right? You want to talk about those Alien Sedition Acts, and going along with the Alien Sedition Acts, everything that there's so much to pull here, right? You want to give context. So I dropped the term Alien and Sedition Acts. You don't just say Alien Sedition Acts and move on, right? You have to develop it. Why is it important that power is changing? Okay, we are under the Constitution, right? So we are our own country. We have this government that we've established. We're worrying that the establishment of this government is something that can fall apart. We've already seen one government fail. The French are seeing their government fail. So it's very conceivable that everything could fall apart. It's very conceivable that a few corrupt people could try to seize power. And that was what the fear was with the Federalist, with the Alien and Sedition Acts. So when the election of 1800 comes about and the Democratic Republicans are elected into office, and then the Federalists actually step aside and let Jefferson into office, that is the big change, right? It's a peaceful transition of power. It shows the Constitution is working. That is key. The Constitution is working. The government is not falling apart. We are not turning into France, where we're turning against each other and we have heads rolling in the streets. That's not what is happening. Okay? So, you build up your context, then you want to develop your thesis. Your thesis must answer the entire question, right? So, what do we have here? We have the election of 1800 is the revolution of 1800. We identify the change, right? So that change, of course, is what you've led up to in the context that we have a peaceful transition of power. Our new system of government is working and our government is not falling apart. You have defined the revolution of 1800. That is the first thing that you have to do. The next thing you have to do is identify the aptly named. Why is it called the Revolution of 1800? All right, why is it a fundamental change? I can't spell tonight. Why is it such a big change? We have one set of ruling values turning over to a different set of values. Federalist, Democratic, Republican. We have to identify two different areas where that is happening. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave that open for right now. Let's go into each of these areas and let's develop those. So, economics. I'm going to put the bullet points here. You should be filling in with the notes from what I am talking about. All right, so let's talk about economics. We have the Federalists. Okay, the Federalists. Why are they called the Federalists? Well, they want a strong central government. All right, who is in charge of the Federalists? Why, that is Alexander Hamilton, right? Hamilton is the guy in charge of the Federalist Party. He believes in a strong central government, and back when he was Secretary of the Treasury under George Washington, he proposed his economic plan. Do we remember this, right? The economic plan. He wanted to create the Bank of the United States. He wanted to assume the state debts. Why does he want to do that? He wants to be able to govern the banks. He wants to be able to make sure that the federal government could get credit. If the federal government could get credit, if the federal government could oversee the state debts, that does two things. Number one, it provides us with a greater standing overseas. Think about it. If we owe money to other countries have an interest in the United States remaining a country. Because if our country falls apart, they lose money. That's bad. What does that do? It strengthens the federal government. The second way, by assuming the debts of the states now are overlooking the federal government. Think of the example that we used in class, right? You run up a huge phone bill. You turn to your mother. Your mother bails you out, but now she owns you. You better do what mommy says or else. Am I right? Okay, good. So we see that. That is Jefferson's idea. The economy is tied in to the economy is tied into the federal government, and that makes the government stronger, right? Now, the Democratic Republicans, them O, spell right. Okay, what's the Democratic Republicans? They want stronger state governments. They have a distrust of the federal government. Right? What they want, I cannot spell at all tonight. Okay? What they want is the Jeffersonian ideal of what's called a yeoman farmer. Spell. I can't spell anything. Alright, a yeoman farmer. What is a yeoman farmer? These are free farmers. Okay? He believed in the agrarian republic. You have a bunch of free, self-sufficient farmers who care about government, and they are ruling themselves. They have nobody over them, right? So Jefferson believed that if you had people that were taking care of themselves, that's all you needed. The country itself could be great, and the country would develop, and you did not need some strong government telling you what to do, because the stronger that government is, the more power that government has over you. And the more power the government has over you, the worse it is. All right? So think about tying this in. You know, what does this sound familiar? We have a strong distrust of the federal government. Does that sound like the American Revolution? Why, it should, right? Because during the American Revolution, that's what we had. We had a strong government. That government was not listening to the needs of the people, and that's what they are afraid of. So they believe that you build up the states. The states are easier to control by the people, and the people themselves are trying to keep most of their power and most of their money for themselves. They don't have the concern for any of that other stuff, right? So Hamilton is looking at the big picture, right? He is a realist. He wants our country to be a strong country. He wants our government to be an international player. And the way to do that is to build up the government, and is to build and tie it into other governments, make the states, basically own the states, and also make other countries have an interest in us. Everything builds up that government. The more stronger our government is, the stronger we are as a country, and more power that we have. That's what he is concerned about. Jefferson, on the other hand, the Democratic Republicans are more of the idealists, right? They say, we want free people who can take care of themselves. This entire idea about building up a government, that's a problem, right? We distrust the government. We already fought a revolution against abusive power. And for all they were concerned, the Federalists already had started to abuse their power with the Alien and Sedition Acts. This is the kind of stuff they are afraid of, and they don't want to see that coming in. So, that's economics. Let's talk about foreign policy. Okay? Now, foreign policy is going to be really big during the birth of our country because of that little thing called the French Revolution, which actually turns out to be wars between France and just about every other country in Europe, but more important than any others is going to be Britain. Now, in foreign policy, The Federalists are Anglophiles. Okay? Anglophiles, meaning they support England, right? They want to be good friends with England. Basically, you have to understand this. It goes back to economics. England has the Navy. England has the economy. England's got the biggest empire in the world. England is where the money is, right? So they are thinking trade, they are thinking power, right? Even though we fought to get our independence from England doesn't mean that we can't be friends with England. The Federalists saw themselves more as the children that were ready to go out on their own, right? So they had their teenage rebellion. Now they're ready for mom and dad to see them as a man. And they want to build up their power network, and they see the best way to do that is to work with England. England's got the strongest economy. England's got the biggest empire. England is already industrializing. You add all of those things in together, and we make the most money working with England. And as we've already established when we talk about economics, money equals power. So, the Federalist foreign policy, right? We want to make sure we are friends with England. So you remember when we almost went to war with England, we signed that thing called Jay's Treaty. It was very unpopular at home. Why was it very unpopular? Because basically we gave up everything to England, you know, in just in order so we didn't go to war with them. That's our big concern. We want to make sure we stay neutral, and we want to make sure that we can continue to trade with England, because England is the biggest. The more we trade with England, the more money we make. The more money we make, the stronger our government is. The stronger our government is, the stronger our country is. See how that all makes sense? Now, they are against France. All right, so think about it. We have the quasi-war with France. All right, so basically we almost go to war with France during the Adams administration. The only thing that stops us from going to war with France is Napoleon coming to power. And Napoleon had other things to worry about, like conquering Europe. So he didn't care about us. As a matter of fact, we're going to be great friends with France a little bit later on. Okay? So, that's the Federalists. What about the Democrats? Okay, the Democratic Republicans, they are Francophiles, right? So, they support France. They support the alliance that we've had with France. You got to remember, France helped us gain our independence. We signed an alliance with France. The Democratic Republicans want us to uphold that alliance, right? The French had a revolution. They threw off their monarchy. The French are free people. Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans like that idea. They see this as a kindred spirit. They see the Federalists and the Anglophiles as kind of being with the old ways. The Democratic Republicans, they see this as the new way that's developing, right? So we want to be with French. We want to be in our brothers with liberty. We want to support them, right? They are against the quasi-war with France. During the Washington administration, a lot of Democratic Republicans supported Citizen Ghent. Remember him going around recruiting people to go and fight for France? Vive la France! Well, Democratic Republicans were the people that he was targeting, the people that he was talking to. All right? Now, when the Democratic Republicans come into power, they're going to have a great relationship with Napoleon. so good that Napoleon actually sells us a huge chunk of land. You remember that chunk of land he sells us? It was called the Louisiana Purchase. All right, Jefferson wanted to go and he wanted to buy the port of New Orleans from Napoleon for $10 million. Instead, Napoleon's like, here, take all of Louisiana for $15 million. Right? So basically, we did really well there. That's where they are. So the Democratic Republicans want to get along with France. They are supporting France. Whereas the Federalists are Anglophiles. They are supporting England. Right? So, and we got to understand why. Federalists, they say this is going to help build us up. Right? More trade, stronger economy, stronger country. Anti-Federalists, Democratic Republicans, right? These are our brothers in revolution. These are free people fighting together. Okay? Let's go. Forget about judiciary because that comes later. Let's talk about politics. Okay? This one we can get into the weeds a little bit. Okay, what is the politics of the Federalists? All right, they believe in a loose construction of the Constitution or a loose interpretation of the Constitution. You remember this? Yeah, it's coming back. Okay, what's a loose construction of the Constitution? It means that the government can do anything necessary and proper to do what it has to do. The elastic clause of the Constitution. All right, necessary and proper. Okay, and what that allows the government to do is it allows the government to be stronger. Right? They want that big government. Right? They want that centralized authority. It's not about New York. It's not about Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Connecticut. It's not about all of the individual states. It is about one identity as a country. Right? And that one identity as a country means that everybody is stronger. Right? Basically a stronger country in the world. Makes sense? The way to do this is through a loose interpretation of the Constitution, right? So, the federal government can make a bank. The federal government can pass laws to restrict rights when it has to during a time of crisis. It can do things like the Alien and Sedition Acts. Why? Because the federal government is supreme and the federal government is charged with creating order. We have to remember there were rebellions before. The Federalists believe that you have to squash those rebellions so that you have a strong government. So some things to highlight there. Bank of the United States, that issue. The Alien and Sedition Acts, again, flush those out, develop those. How do they show that Federalist mindset of building up the stronger government, that oneness? The Anti-Federalist or the Democratic Republicans, they believe in a strict interpretation or a strict construction of the Constitution, right? They base their beliefs on the 10th Amendment and the Bill of Rights. 10th Amendment technically is in the Bill of Rights. 10th Amendment says any power not explicitly delegated to the federal government is reserved for the states and the people, right? They believe that the states and the people should have most of the power and that the federal government is a necessary evil. Think about the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, right? The federal government gets its power from the states. The states can override the federal government if the federal government is doing something that they do not agree with, right? They believe in controlling that government, making that government smaller and weaker. That's what they believe in, right? So these are the ideas that we want to develop here. And as you notice, these ideas all go in together. Once we understand how that all works, then we're good. So, in the next part in your thesis, going back to this thesis, notice how we outlined everything before we looked at the thesis. This gives us a better idea of how we want to write our thesis. This is a to what extent. All right, so how much or how little is this, the Revolution of 1800, correctly named, right? Is this a fundamental change? Or is this not a fundamental change? Make the claim. And then identify why with 2 areas. So identify why with economics, foreign policy, or politics. Pick 2 and just briefly identify why. Give the big idea, right? You don't want to give all the supporting details. All the supporting details go in your body. You give the big idea here, and ideally, then this would turn into your topic sentences for your paragraph. Okay, you gotta remember, your thesis does not have to be 1 sentence. It could be more than 1 sentence. All right, and you could break it up into 2 sentences, looking at the 2 different areas. Okay, so that's how you want to work on breaking this essay up. You want to think about what we've talked about here. You only need to write about 2 of these. There's a lot you can write about. A lot of it goes in together. Remember, with any essay, right, the devil is in the details, right? So develop your thoughts. Explain what you mean. Okay, this happens in your body paragraphs. All right, your examples, you develop your examples. You show what you know. All of these things that we do in our body, right? So, that's what I want you to work on. Questions, email me, right? I'm here. So send me an email if you have any questions. Work on developing this. I'm really looking forward to reading what you come up with. Okay, guys, have a good one. Again, I am sorry I could not be there. I hope